One of the comments I got on the latest full-length build video was that all of the math and such was confusing and not very well explained, and some people might find it useful for what I was trying to figure out. So this is going to be an attempt to explain the thought processes a little bit better, so if someone else has something that they're trying to do, like say they are trying to make a similar custom box on their end, they know the thought processes of what I did, of how I got the sizing for the little boxes. So I started out, and I'm hoping this is visible, I started out by measuring the thickness of each individual coin, because in this specific instance the goal was that there are 20 coins that are supposed to go into a slot. And so if you get the individual thickness of the specific coin value, like 1, 2, 5, 10, etc., if that is 5/64 of an inch using the micrometer, then 20 of those, after converting that to decimal form, gives you a 1.5. Once you know that you have a specific sizing of each, and you know the thickness that you're going to have, and then you know that's the total actual thickness, you have to then keep in mind you don't want just that as the actual thickness of the slot, because it's going to be a friction fit, a very tight friction fit, and if you are at all off with any of your joints or anything else, it's not going to fit. So you need to leave some space. So like for example, in this box, the felt was a 32nd of an inch. So in decimal, that is this. So there were, in a given cup, there was felt on two sides in any direction that you're measuring. This direction, there's two sides. This direction, there's two sides. So that's 2 times that number, which is a 1/16 of an inch. So for doing the measurement of that, I basically erred on the side of, we should have it close. So for example, 1.74, if that's the maximum size of the coins, but for 20 of them in a stack, then it would be that plus 2 pieces of felt, and that would give you a decimal number. And then you would take that decimal number and also add in some. So I would probably add in at least 1/32 or 2/32 of leeway so that the coins can move back and forth, just because that way it's easier to get them in and out. You don't want to have to be fiddling and pushing really tight in unless that's your goal. But then how do you go from there to doing the placement on the actual piece? So if you have this as a digit and you have one of these dial calipers, specifically the digital ones, you can, depending on the how precise the numbers go, you can get the same decimal equivalent on the display. Then if you change it, but most table saws and other things don't work in decimal equivalents. So you would then change it back to fractions, and that's the same as 1 9/16. So that's something that if you were trying to get the spacing, you could dial that in on your table saw or even on your measuring tape. That's easy to figure out. This is much harder to figure out on a measuring tape. 1 9/16, that's fairly simple. So then what you would do, and what I did for this crazy diagram, is I would take on the paper, I'd figure out, okay, how big is this supposed to be? It's supposed to be 1 9/16. Did I have one that was that size? I don't know if I had one that was exactly that size. I don't think I did, because I had leeway plugged in. So in this case, for a given single box, these are all the numbers that I had to figure out. I decided I wanted it approximately 9/16 away from the edge of the plastic. That's where the box would start, and then that was this decimal equivalent. And then I would have the box 1 3/8 inches wide and 1 3/4 inches tall, and then I had the 9/16 spacing in between. And then for the next one, I would have a gap, and then this other one again would be spaced off from the side. It would have the 2 heights. So this one was also 1 3/4 up, 1 3/8 across. So 1, 2, and 5 were all 1 3/4 by 1 3/8. But you move over to the next one. Oh, okay. This one's also 1 1/4. So the 10 coin is 1 3/4 up and 1 3/8. But the 20 is 1 3/4 up and 1.5 wide, because it's a different width coin. Because it's not just the thickness of the coin, you also have to go for the width, because that's what slot size you have to do. And then the 50 was similar to the 20. It was 1 3/4 tall and 1.5 wide. But you go over to the 100 and the 200, those are 1 3/4 tall and 1 9/16 wide. So I think what I did, just to make it somewhat simple, I had all these at 1 3/4 tall, because that was the maximum of the coins. I'm hoping it's all going to work. When he gets it, I hope I hope it all fits. Alex, you have to let me know if it fits. If not, I'll fix it. But yeah, so all these were slightly different for the sizing. So once I got this for like the version 1 and the version 2, the version 1 was the plywood piece and version 2 was the plastic piece. So I would get these measurements plugged into the dial caliper, and then I would go from the edge. I would put like 9/16 in, and I would run up the edge. Okay, there's a 9/16 line on the plywood. And then I would add 9/16 plus 1 3/8. That would give me a decimal equivalent. I plug it back into here and go 2 inches and something or whatever it is. And then I would put that on the calipers, and I would run up the plywood, and that would give me another line that I could put a pencil mark on. And then eventually, the dial caliper is only so big, but you can measure from both sides. So I would measure across so far, and I'd go from the other side and measure back. And then similar for the verticals, you'd have spacing along the bottom edge, and then that spacing plus the height, that's where that line would go. That's how I figured out the first version and the second version. And the third version, I used something similar, but at that point I had the physical little boxes that I was able to place and get the measurements aligned. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions, ask in the comments. I will attempt to do another video or answer them in the comments, but that's basically what I did. I went, because you can do conversions from decimal to fractions online or sometimes probably on your phone, but if you have one of these digital dial calipers, you can do it that way too, and that may be easier. You still have to do the math in your head unless you're really crazy. I'm not that crazy. I did the math on the calculator. Here you can see 20 times 0.05 or 0.15265 equals this. So 20 times a 64th of an inch, because I had a 64th of an inch spacing for some of the things just so it wasn't, physically tight. So that gave me 5/16 of an inch. So you'd think that, okay, a 64th, that's not that much. But if you have 20 of them, that's already now 5/16 of an inch. That's slightly more than a 1/4 inch. So yeah, the little numbers add up quick when you're not paying attention or not accounting for them. So anyway, hopefully this will help. And if only I had done all of those things in the final version of the box insert and not in the first failed version that I ended up not using. Because as you can see in this picture, there are 4 of the slots. The number 2 is actually okay. There was one that was in the wrong place. The 10, the 200, the 5, the 50, all those were wrong. And why is that? Well, I did 1 3/4 for those slots instead of adding in the spacing like I was supposed to for taking account of the 2 layers of felt. And if you take 1.75 minus the 2 layers of felt, that's 1.68. And guess what? There are 4 stacks of 20 coins that are larger in just the coins themselves than 1.68, because it wasn't 1.75, it was 1.68 because of the felt. I have to work and fix it. That's okay. I should be able to do it. Worst case, I will rebuild the entire inside of the box from scratch again. I know how to do it. I have more wood. Should be fine. I'm thinking all I have to do is just peel the felt up and narrow those little tiny boards a little bit in each side, and then put the felt back down, and we should be okay. Worst case, if that does work for distance wise, I might have to add a little bit more felt in the corners or redo the sides of the felt. This is not only an important video for everybody else, it's an important video for me. I should have written down on my diagram the spacing plus the felt, not just the spacing of the coins, and I screwed that up. Let this be a warning to you. You can make a full finished project that looks awesome that's wrong if you don't pay attention to all the numbers. I will not do this again, I hope.